Long before refrigeration existed in any form, ancient civilizations already understood something surprising. Ice could be captured, stored, and kept from melting for months, if you were clever and patient enough about it. As early as 1780 BCE, Mesopotamian records describe purpose-built ice houses, deep pits packed with snow, and ice harvested from nearby mountains during winter, insulated with straw and animal skins to slow the melt through the punishing heat of summer. This wasn't a minor convenience. In a world with no mechanical cooling of any kind, the ability to keep something cold for months at a time was closer to a small miracle than a household luxury. Ancient Persian engineers eventually perfected this idea into structures called yakshals, remarkable dome buildings that could keep ice frozen solid even in scorching desert heat, using clever passive airflow and evaporative cooling techniques that modern engineers still study today. Keeping something cold, it turned out, was one of humanity's oldest and most persistent obsessions, centuries before anyone had the faintest idea how a refrigerator might someday work. Ice wasn't just a practical curiosity in the ancient world. It quickly became a symbol of extraordinary wealth. Roman emperors reportedly sent runners into the mountains to fetch snow, which was then mixed with honey, fruit, and wine to create early chilled desserts, a luxury reserved almost exclusively for the imperial court and the extremely wealthy. In ancient China, ice houses date back even further, with archaeological evidence suggesting organized ice harvesting and storage as early as 1100 BCE, primarily used to preserve food and cool the drinks of nobility during brutally hot summers. Chinese emperors employed dedicated officials whose entire job was managing the empire's ice supply, a position of genuine political importance, since controlling access to cold was, in a very real sense, controlling comfort itself. Across nearly every ancient civilization that could access it, the same pattern repeated. Ice meant power. Ice meant status. And for almost everyone else in the ancient world, ice simply meant something they would likely never touch in their entire lives. For thousands of years, ice remained something you could only get if you lived near mountains, or were wealthy enough to have it transported at enormous expense. Then, in 1806, an American businessman named Frederick Tudor did something almost nobody thought was possible. He loaded a ship in Boston with blocks of ice cut from frozen New England lakes and sailed it all the way to the Caribbean island of Martinique. Most of his cargo melted long before it arrived. His first shipment was, by any reasonable measure, a financial disaster. But Tudor was convinced the idea itself was sound, and over the following decades, he refined nearly every part of the process. Better insulation using sawdust, faster loading techniques, and specially designed ships built to slow melting during long ocean voyages. By the 1830s, Tudor's so-called Ice King empire was shipping New England lake ice as far as India, creating an entirely new global trade built on something that, by definition, was actively trying to disappear the entire time it traveled. Ice had officially become one of the strangest, most improbable international commodities in the history of trade. Natural ice harvesting became a massive seasonal industry throughout the 19th century, particularly across the northern United States. Every winter, workers would cut enormous blocks directly from frozen lakes and rivers, store them in heavily insulated ice houses packed with sawdust, and distribute them throughout the following summer to households, breweries, and butcher shops that depended entirely on this single, weather-dependent harvest. The problem was obvious to anyone paying attention. An unusually warm winter could mean a genuine ice shortage the following summer, an entire industry held hostage by unpredictable weather. The real solution arrived through mechanical refrigeration, first developed in workable form during the 1850s, though it took decades of refinement before it could compete with the sheer scale of the natural ice trade. By the early 20th century, mechanical ice-making plants had finally overtaken natural ice harvesting entirely, freeing an entire industry from its dependence on cold winters, frozen lakes, and the increasingly outdated business of an ice king's frozen empire. The truly transformative shift came with the household refrigerator, which began appearing in American homes during the 1920s and became a standard fixture in most households by the 1950s. For the first time in human history, keeping food and drinks cold no longer required proximity to mountains, frozen lakes, or an elaborate seasonal harvesting industry. It simply required electricity and a small appliance sitting quietly in the corner of your kitchen. What had once been an almost unimaginable luxury reserved for Roman emperors and Chinese nobility had, within just a few generations, become something nearly every household on Earth could access without a second thought. Ice cube trays became standard kitchen equipment, and cold drinks, once the mark of extraordinary privilege, became an entirely unremarkable part of daily life. Today, ice is so completely unremarkable that most people never once consider its journey. Automatic ice makers built directly into refrigerator doors, ice delivered instantly from restaurant machines, entire industries built around ice sculptures and specialty cocktail ice, all without a single thought given to Frederick Tudor's disastrous first shipment or the ancient Persian engineers who first learned to trap winter's cold through the height of summer. From a Mesopotamian ice pit packed with straw, to a ship full of melting cargo bound for the Caribbean, to the automatic dispenser built into your refrigerator door right now, ice carried the exact same quiet purpose across every single era it touched. Proof that sometimes the most ordinary conveniences in our daily lives were once considered nothing short of miraculous.